We're on the couch again this morning to talk all things living abroad for our series Thriving Abroad Together. Today I've got Joanne who's joining us, and she's going to share her story and perhaps some challenges, some beautiful parts, and some tips and tricks for living across multiple countries. Welcome.
Thank you.
Good to be here. Great. All right. Tell me your story and where you've lived in the world.
I was born in the UK and I lived there until the age of 36. And then made the big step to move here to Perth, Australia. I've never lived abroad before. Stayed pretty much very close to home. So yeah, big step.
And why did you move to Australia?
A couple of factors. So work opportunities, and my family just love sports and the outdoors. So yes, of course, beautiful weather here, and yeah, been outdoors.
You got some fantastic swimmers in your family, don't you? I suppose the weather here is a bit more conducive to swimming a lot.
Yes, very. We did do it in the UK, but very cold, and yeah, need a lot less equipment. We were gloved up, capped up.
The reason that I've put this podcast together is because quite often the idea of moving abroad with a job is quite glorified, and we hold up the people that are moving for these job opportunities as, you know, the be all and end all. But ultimately there's partners and families that are following along with these amazing journeys, and sometimes it's those partners that are left to navigate all the decisions and life admin, as it were, with the rest of life, right? So how has the dynamics worked in your family?
Yeah, absolutely right. There's so much going on when you relocate. So we've definitely had our, I guess our roles, our different jobs to do. So, and yeah, it's been probably one of the most challenging things that I've ever done, because you're just changing everything all at once, really starting from scratch again. There's, you know, multiple things that have to be happening simultaneously. So it's definitely been teamwork. So, and as you say, I've sort of had to set out what I can be doing during that process. And yes, we're sort of working together, communicating together, but you know, sort of not doing, like, we have our lists. Lists really, really important.
Yeah,
absolutely, so you don't forget anything. But yeah, we are a family of 5. We have 3 children, so of course the children relocating from their schools, finding somewhere to live, and then just all, like you say, sort of like the admin things, you know, sort of getting all our sort of identity registered, because, you know, we're not known here. So a lot of paperwork, sort of, yeah, lots of applications to go through, lots of research involved. So yes, it's definitely been, you know, multitasking and, you know, yeah, working together.
So you've experienced exactly what I'm trying to share on this podcast. Is basically there's a lot to navigate and wade through and learn in moving abroad.
It is very overwhelming, and there's only, I guess, so much you can do prior to actually physically being here. Sure. So of course, like, lots of research. There are a couple of things that we were able to do ahead of getting here, but the majority is sort of when we're here. So that's sort of as we prepared to move, getting those lists of everything. So once, you know, we hit the ground, we can just hit it running.
Yeah. I can only imagine, having lived somewhere for so long and now moving here. I mean, is there a plan to be here now indefinitely, or when you first moved, did you think to yourself, we'll give it a try for a couple of years and see how we go?
Yeah, I would say we had sort of a 3-year plan, you know, to get settled and yes, sort of see how we go. No regrets, absolutely love it. And yes, so the plan is to stay.
We love you here, so that's great. Thank you. So let's talk about now, if you had your time again and you knew what you knew now, what would you do differently in moving from the UK to Australia?
Reflecting back on when we relocated, I feel sort of being my first time as well, sort of living anywhere else, I was very, I think, consumed with, before leaving the UK, sort of wrapping things up there, because there is a lot to do. So sort of, you know, packing up the house, and, you know, we sold our property, so sort of everything that entails. So and very much, I think my husband, he sort of took on board sort of the job of doing the research ahead of us arriving. So for myself personally, I think it's really important that sort of we were both involved in that process. So when we arrived, it was a steep learning curve for me, just navigating the area where we were, sort of once we physically arrived here and driving around the area, I felt very lost. And yeah, sort of figuring out where we're going to live and schools and things like that. I think I'd paid a bit more attention to that sort of ahead of time, just researching a bit more because we had, so much available on the internet now. So
did you do a reconnaissance mission? Did you come here before you moved here?
No.
How did that come about?
Well, it was the plan, and then COVID hit, so everything locked down. So yeah, for a good couple of years, we couldn't leave. So we just we just took the leap.
Yeah.
But once we were here, of course, then it all happened. But I think for me, it would have been, it would have just been wise to sort of do a little bit more research into just, sort of the day-to-day things like whilst you're here. I also have celiac disease, so I'm gluten-free, and fortunately, it's readily available here, so no issues. But yeah, sort of physically getting here and figuring out meals, when I'm going to go and shop, just getting around.
Another layer to consideration.
Yeah. So I think if I'd paid a bit more attention to sort of researching it ahead of time. But then again, I'm not sure if anything's changed, but in regards to sort of our living situation, at the time when we arrived, we couldn't arrange sort of ahead of time a rental or anything like that. We physically had to be here, attend inspections physically. So again, while sort of my husband was really good at that, researching the suburbs. I mean, we don't have suburbs in the UK, so things like that, sort of navigating.
What's your equivalent?
We just have some villages, and so all very similar, but just sort of, we don't have a freeway and a highway. So, it's those little day-to-day things. So but yeah, so it was very strange getting on that plane and not knowing where we were going to be, where we were going to be living. So
you had short-term
a mix of daunting and exciting.
Pardon? You had short-term.
We did only 2 weeks. So yeah, so it was sort of real pressure. But sort of once we landed, we just hit the road and started inspecting properties and applying. In the midst of sort of a housing crisis, it was daunting. But yeah, so only so much you can do ahead of time. But I think I could have spent a little bit more time looking into that. But I think, again, sort of talking about teamwork and us sort of delegating, I feel like there was still so much to do in the UK, sort of, that we had to get done before we left. So that was sort of task to me. So I worked my way through that list, and then when we arrived, created new lists.
And your partner, had to do some extra study when he arrived here, but ultimately his day-to-day is going to work and is full of that work commitment.
Yeah.
And so you're left with the rest.
Yes. Yeah. So he works
as much as you are a team.
Yes.
Yeah, great. And then tell me about how obviously finding somewhere to live is a major part of moving countries. What are the differences between the two countries?
For ourselves, we owned a property in the UK, so we changing from into the rental market. So just having all the elements prepared for the application for rental property. So I think it would be very similar to the UK. I think the difference for us when you're relocating from another country is things like your ID documents. You need multiple items. I believe here it's on the point system for your ID. So just sort of having all that available, because we haven't rented here in Australia before. Didn't have that history, so references were really, really important. So just having all that available. We actually wrote a supporting letter, just sort of
that's a good idea.
People, when we were applying, just so we could talk a little bit about ourselves, our situation, just to sort of support that application process.
And then as you felt more settled in the area and you considered purchasing property, what did you have to navigate there?
With buying in a different country, there are some additional things to be aware of. Again, this is where it's really important that you have a settlement agent and broker through the process, but there are additional requirements and conditions when applying abroad. So it's just really important to be aware of those when going through that process.
Have you learned anything through that process personally?
Yes, that when doing your research, it's important to be looking at the correct state, because what we weren't aware of is that the rules don't apply to all of Australia. They can differ from state to state. So that's really, really important.
That might be a key takeaway for some.
Very, very important. We did make the mistake. We were looking at some guidelines, thought we sort of understood the process, and then realised that I think I think it might have been South Australia or a different state, so different rules apply. So yeah, very important to check the state.
Okay, I suppose one of the reasons that I'm so happy to have you here today is because you've moved with your family, right? And so there's a whole other element to the decision of moving and then keeping them all happy and making sure they're all settled. So tell me a bit about how the children initially took the idea of moving and working through that.
Not too keen. Of course, they have their friends, very settled in school. Don't want to leave their friends. I think it's friendship's just such a big thing at that age. So
how old were they when you moved?
So my eldest she was in the UK, she was in year 6. The academic years are slightly different, so it would have been year 5 here, but she was just finished up in year 6. We were about to start our summer holiday, and then she was due to start high school. Yeah, so age 11. My son was 9 and my youngest was 4, I believe.
And so how did you help them through that?
Well, I think for all of us it was a big adventure.
Yeah.
That sort of getting them on board. I think we did time it for my eldest with that change going to high school, so all her friends were going off to different schools as well, and it's part of the process, whether it be meeting new people, being at a new school, making new friends. So so she was sort of very on board with all of that. I'm just going on this big adventure and the new experiences we're going to have, and keeping pen pals back at home and staying connected. It's very different now, I think, with technology, that we can have FaceTime with friends and families. So that's been essential. I don't think I would be able to have coped as well, with all the changes without maintaining that connection with family. So in the end, they were very excited about the whole thing. I think when they did start school here, again, just depending on your child's personality, my 2 girls are very, chatty, sociable, have no problems really. Sort of the first day we're coming back, telling me they've made new friends. My son, he's a bit more shy, so he took a bit more time to settle, had a little bit of help with sort of having a buddy to help introduce him to new members of the class. But again, that's just all part of the process, I think. And he's, I think, going through it has become more confident.
It's an enriching experience for the kids, albeit daunting.
Yes, I think it's just being patient and being there as to reassure that it's all part of the process.
So you've spoken about, it was probably the biggest decision for your daughter. As the older they get, the stronger their friendships get, and a bit can dig their heels in a little more. And I suppose they were already doing this one there, so the idea of supporting them, making sure that they found their new community and their new connections in Australia has helped, because they had that really strong hobby and interest. That's what I was wanting to ask. How are the school systems different?
I would say they differ in that if your child excels in an area, there are opportunities here for children to go into, I refer to them as specialist programs within the schools. There's always opportunities. So every year they progress through school, there are opportunities there if a child has a particular interest, or is it excelling in a certain area. So that's, I guess, we nurture them, spend a bit more time on that.
And that's different from what you had experienced.
I would say my experience of, so all my children are in primary school in the UK, and I would say sort of here that is generally very similar. All the children follow the curriculum, and there are opportunities, extracurricular opportunities for the children to get involved in if they have particular interests. Just the one thing I've noticed that differs is in the both primary school and high school, is there are these additional programs that we didn't receive or weren't available in the school that we attended back in the UK. So an example I'll give is they have what's called the IMS music program. So my children have been fortunate enough to learn an instrument through the school IMS program.
In Australia,
Yes, yeah.
But our children do go to the same school. So as my children get older, I'm sure we'll come across that. But as they, from a broader perspective, I suppose, like, are there public and private schools in the UK as well? Is it the same system?
Yes.
Is it based on a catchment like it is here, based on where you live?
Yes, yeah.
What about the cost? And
I would say that's very similar. The other, just to be aware, in the UK we live more rural, so my experiences might differ from people who are relocated sort of from more like from city areas where there might be different experiences and things that are available, but it's the same system with the catchment area based on your residential address. They do have a similar system transitioning from primary school to high school during that application process, where they have what's called an 11 plus selective schools test, which is similar to here, that they have sort of an academic selective schools test. Again, just I think broadening that range of schools that are an option for you to apply to. They do have the private school system as well. Of course, it wasn't where we were located back in the UK, wasn't something that we were sort of close to, so it wasn't an option.
And there was nothing to stop you from coming to a public school and enjoying that for ultimately no cost for someone coming from abroad?
For us, there were costs involved, being a visitor to Australia, additional costs involved, regardless of what school you go to. I think that is sort of taxed annually. And that would obviously be in addition to if you did decide to go through private education as well. That's a sort of a separate fee that's not going.
Sure. So you have a different fee structure to save me as a local Australian going to a public school.
Yes.
You've got a different setup, but you're still absolutely able to attend.
It does depend on, I guess, the visa program that you're on. So certain visas will incur this fee, others may not. So it's, again, just doing sort of your research on that once you're going through that process.
So we've covered off on your story. We've covered off on some of the challenges that you've had and what you've had to navigate since you've been here. What have been the best things that you've encountered since you've arrived in Australia?
The community. It's amazing. So thank you very much. I've never felt alone through this process. There has always been a really good community back home and here in Australia. Our family didn't know anybody, and we've immediately been welcomed with open arms, well supported. I, as I said, had a lot of things to work through and was learning all the time. I didn't know all the things that I was required to do, but there are a lot of expats living here as well, which have gone through the process before and have been able to give really good advice. And just so many people, giving their time to signpost me to not just resources, but just for ourselves and the children, opportunities to get to know like members of the community, just really be a part of all, the local events, which are all the time. There's always lots going on to get involved in. It's just been a really, really good experience. Of course, the weather has not let us down.
Different from the UK. What are you talking about?
So we have been, outdoors. Really just continuing with our swimming and sports, and which is everything also that we wanted to do. So
even swimming in the open ocean now.
that was yeah, that was
An experience.
an experience. Yes, beautiful. Yeah, so absolutely no regrets. And oh yeah, all throughout this process, I've just learned so much, met so many amazing people, and still meeting amazing people.
Yeah, only, early on in your journey.
Yeah,
So,
yeah.
and if anyone were to be thinking about moving from the UK to Australia, what would be maybe a checklist or some tips and tricks that you could share to get them started?
As we sort of touched on before, doing as much research as you can, and just sort of thinking about, the things that you, I guess, like to be involved in, not just with work, but, in your downtime, and then, just checking out. I think there's so many different things on offer to get involved in. It just gives you an opportunity to meet people, just build that community around you.
Yeah.
Here, yeah. And all that admin stuff is essential. Just preparing those lists of, it's really all those things that we do, like for myself being back home, it's all those things in the UK that I did anyway, but I think you just do it throughout those years as you sort of more slowly. It's all the same things, but you just have to do it, condense it, yes,
quick learning curve.
And it can be overwhelming, but writing those lists and just working your way through, it makes it more manageable.
Yeah. So we provide some lists of, checklists of those people that are either going to move to Australia or going to repatriate to Australia. So that, any resources that you can get your hands on to help that process, I'm sure is, a good place to start. That is so fantastic. So thank you so much for sharing. From how I support clients, and we're talking about the financial world, we're talking about different currencies, we're talking about different pension systems, banking systems. Is there anything that you could add in that space, I suppose, of what to expect, and as the differences between the two countries sort of can be quite big?
We've touched on, when discussing sort of the school system, some additional fees that may be encountered. But there are lots of different systems, I feel, sort of financially, so some additional expenses that I wouldn't have sort of thought about back in the UK in our situation. One thing we sort of didn't touch on is sort of, I guess, the Medicare system here. For some visitors to Australia, you are required to take out private healthcare. And sort of when that you may move over or be here on a permanent residency as well, there are government initiatives that encourage private healthcare, which so we didn't have that before, which may have to sort of be incorporated into your expenses. As you sort of touched on, currency changes, just sort of differences in the pension system, which you call a superannuation. These sorts of things, it's really helpful, I think, when to reach out to professionals, and which can assist in sort of like financial planning and looking ahead as well, because I think there are different, I want to say, programs or packages, I'm not sure, and yes, that's where sort of like the experts really help. So I didn't touch on before with all going through all the admin processes before, as you're sort of getting set up, there are lots on the website, and also helplines with things like Medicare, and I think like the different government departments also are there. But it's really just reaching out to those professionals to help you with knowing all your responsibilities, and you sort of just help with that planning, because it is different.
I find with clients, similar to what you touched on, is when they're planning a move, they're really focused on wrapping up what they have rather than what's beyond that. It's kind of like preparing for childbirth, but not really thinking about the fact that you have a child after. I kind of liken it to you're leading up to this day where you move, and then everything beyond that, because it's the unknown, you don't really know what you need to know yet.
Yes, and it's all about that, when you first arrive, like all those things you have to do straight away, and then once those things are done, it's really starting to understand those different systems, getting expert advice to then start, particularly if you are staying. I think because we had sort of this 3-year plan, and now we're sort of looking ahead, further ahead. It's, we're now entering that stage where, we need to get some expert advice on, how, to better financial plan and, plan, as we really settle here now. That we, do it correctly.
And there's a lot to navigate, but ultimately, and not I don't think it's so much of a difference between the UK and Australia, because of course people move between those two countries so often. But in the move between other countries, actually there's major tax implications of and a lot to navigate in terms of moving and then considering it later. As an example, like if you were to move from Australia to the UK, right, and then be a non-resident of Australia, then you might lose your primary residence exemption. So where you don't pay capital gains on your home here in Australia as a resident, as a non-resident, you certainly would if you then sold it. It should be like massive. It can be like hundreds of thousands of dollars that people think, oh, I'll just sort it out later. But then their lives and their plans revolve around their new country. So as people move around the world, it's nice to have that planning phase of, you know, whether it be 6-12 months out from when you're going to move countries, as well as that, okay, now we're settled, now we're here, now let's make a plan for the future. So yeah, all really important. But ultimately, I'm just so glad that you've had a great experience. We continue to nurture you and make sure you have a great experience so you never leave us.
Thank you.
Thanks, Jo.